Good morning. This is January 3rd, 2021. A lot has happened since last year. Been doing these presentations live for a long time now, and coming up on a year pretty soon. I am thankful that you guys are still watching these, that they are helpful, that what I'm producing here is of use and of value. It does mean a lot to me to see that it is having an effect on people's lives. I'm in Hebrews chapter 11, and I'll spend a little bit of time reviewing the idea of faith. Last week I was in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 4, speaking about Abel, where it says, "By faith Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and through it he, being dead, still speaks." So I spent a lot of time on this last week, just a little bit of a brief review. And that is that we have Abel who testified of God. His life was a testimony of God's, was a testimony of him. Now, Cain could have been considered to be a person of faith. He could have been considered to be a person who was testifying of God. As I explained last week, he presented an offering. It was an offering that was reflective. It reflected what God told his father Adam concerning the curse that he would experience because of the violation that was committed in the Garden of Eden, where he told Adam, "You're going to work the ground. You're going to pull weeds. That's how you're going to do it." So Cain did that. And he presented an offering as evidence to show that he did that. And so there is an expression of faith that is going on. And through Cain, he does testify of God. And when God spoke of Cain, passed judgment on Cain, was disappointed concerning the heart of Cain, that what he was trying to do was he was trying to obtain his right standing. He was trying to please God by his obedience to the curse that was given, that you're going to work the ground. And he was trying to assert his right standing with God by what he did. And that was something that did not please God. He does not want to have a relationship with a person that's based on what it is that they do. I mean, you can think about this yourself, right? Would you like to have someone in your life who decides, all right, and you decide, I mean, the decision is that you're going to be pleased with that person because of what that person does, all right, in a similar relationship that exists between man and God, and that you will respond to that and you will provide them with rewards, gifts, something to that effect. Do you really want to have somebody in your life on that basis? If you do, then when they do things, then they are putting you into a form of debt. All right? And this is a very destructive way to have a relationship, such that there's a relationship based on I do something for you and then you owe me. You owe me. And if you don't pay up, then you are evil. All right, now this puts a tremendous amount of control over the person who has to deliver, in a sense, because the person who does these things to put the other person in debt can decide not to do these things, in which case they control the relationship that way, or if they do these things, then they control the relationship through the debt mechanism. All right, does God really want to have that kind of relationship with a person, such that these people, we get to decide when God is going to bless us, when God is going to be pleased with us? All right, the life of repentance and obedience makes a provision for this kind of relationship. It just does. Now, of course, it doesn't ever work out well, but in our own minds, in our own beliefs, and in our heart, we can tend to think in these terms. So with God having this relationship with Cain, he informed Cain that he did not want to have this kind of relationship with him. That was just not what he was interested in. Abel, on the other hand, he presented an offering that was from the condition of his heart. It was something that was contrary to what God told Adam that they would have to do. It was contrary to that. And Abel presented something to God as an expression of his recognition that God is important in his life, but it was not done out of obligation. Abel was not trying to assert his right standing with God by the offering. All right, and so what pleased God was that Abel was testifying that God exists. Abel was giving of something freely without any expectation of anything in return. And so that opens up the opportunity for there to be mutual participation in each other's lives in a healthy way that's not based on, I do for you and then you owe me, pay up, or, this isn't going to work kind of thing. All right, there are relationships that exist like that, but what I'm saying is that these kinds of relationships, they have tremendous limitations, all right, and they can become caustic. They can become destructive if you have people who are trying to build something, a little bit more healthy is the right way to say that. Okay, so there are places for those kinds of relationships, business relationships, for example, even occasionally in personal relationships, those things can kind of work. But as a whole, with friendship, with friends, with people who relate to each other outside of these kinds of things, it just doesn't work very well. And that's the kind of relationship that God wants to have with us. He wants to have one that's based more in the context of friendship, as opposed to the context of a business deal or some other kind of arrangement that people, in most cases are looking to have with each other. All right, now what we have, though, is we have Abel testifying of God through what he's doing, and God also testifies of Abel. That's what we have in verse 4. In verse 4, by faith Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, but again, Cain still testified of God, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, because God was testifying on behalf of Abel, saying, this is something that I can say about Abel. I'm not able to say this about Cain. I have other things that I can say about Cain. So he did testify of Cain, but not the kind of testimony that we would like to have. And so God testifying of his gifts, and through it, he being dead still speaks. The example of Abel and what Abel did and what God did in response gives us something that we can continue to speak about, continue to learn from, and continue to understand. All right, let me move forward into verse 5. By faith, Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death, and was not found, because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony, that he pleased God. But without faith it is impossible to please him, for he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. This is the small section here, 2 verses that we have on Enoch. All right, now it says at the beginning of verse 5, by faith Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death, and was not found because God had taken him. But if we go back and we look at Genesis chapter 5, I'm going to do that. Genesis chapter 5, verses 21 to 24, it doesn't exactly say that. In Genesis chapter 5, verses 21 to 24, we have the testimony of Enoch. In verse 21, it says, Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. After he begot Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. That's what we have. We have that Enoch walked with God, and God took him. in Hebrews chapter 11, it says that he did not see death. But it doesn't say that in Genesis chapter 5. All right? And so there is some uncertainty because of this. There is a little bit of uncertainty as to whether or not Enoch saw death. Or maybe he didn't see death in the sense that he died before he noticed that he was going to die. Maybe that was the case. We never found a body. Maybe God removed him physically in that sense as well, or the body died in some unknown place, and maybe it was consumed by wild animals and the weather. That could have been the case, and that we don't have anyone who can testify of whatever happened to Enoch, so it was assumed that he was removed. This is a reasonable explanation of Genesis chapter 5, that according to the perception of the people at that time, it was as if God just took him out of here, and that they don't have a body. All right, that's a possibility. Or Enoch could have just simply left town. That's a possibility as well. He could have left town, gone somewhere else, set up a new home someplace else, and nobody knew where he was, and he died there. This does happen. It's not unusual it is a little unusual, but it does happen that sometimes people who are older and they're reaching the end of their life, they live alone, and then they die, and they may not have anybody to check in on them for quite a while before it's discovered that they're no longer alive. This is something that does happen on occasion. I've seen this happen myself a few times. So we don't have enough information available to know for certain, with certainty, that this is really what happened. The writer of Hebrews wrote that he was taken and Enoch did not see death. But like I said, it could be that he was not aware that he was going to die, or maybe he was physically removed. But I don't think there's enough to go on to say with certainty that that is what happened, because if I go back to what the writer would have read and what he would effectively be quoting from, we don't have that much information contained in Genesis chapter 5. All right, this is a little bit of an issue, not a big issue, of course, but I have to mention it because it's here. So there are some possibilities. The first one is, of course, that the writer of Hebrews put this down as part of divine revelation. That's a reasonable possibility, that perhaps the Lord spoke to him and told him this is what happened. All right, and that is perfectly reasonable. That is a reasonable possibility, and that's why I don't worry about this too much, because there is something reasonable about that being the case. But when I think about that, I have to wonder, well, then why is it that God didn't mention this to Moses at the time that this was being recorded? Why would he wait until later and then give the divine revelation? Was he like making some kind of a correction of some kind? Is that what he was thinking? All right, these are some of the things that go on in my head. You may not think about these things at all. And if this is not of no interest to you whatsoever, don't worry, I'm not going to speak about this for much longer, okay? But I think about these things sometimes, and I wonder, why is it that God didn't mention it before? Because we know that God was speaking with Moses, and Moses was recording the things that God was telling him. Genesis chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, God told Moses, this is what happened, all right? This is how it played out. This is what was going on. So when it got to chapter 5, or the passages that we have listed as chapter 5, God spoke to Moses and he says, there was this guy named Enoch. Okay? And Enoch walked with me. That's what he said. Again, in Genesis chapter 5, beginning in verse 21, Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. After he begot Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had sons and daughters. Now, it could be that God was saying, Moses, for the first 65 years of Enoch's life, he wasn't really walking with me. But after Methuselah was born, he sure did. And for another 300 years. That could have been the case. Or maybe Enoch walked with God before Methuselah was born. We don't know for sure, but there could be that impression given here. In verse 23, so all the days of Enoch were 365 years, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. And I can just imagine God speaking to Moses, saying, you know what? Enoch walked with me. And then Enoch was not, because I took him. And that would be a short explanation, wouldn't it? Very simple. But what's interesting is that God would have to tell Moses this. I personally think that God would have had to be the one to tell Moses this. Out of all the people who were alive, of all the people who were living on the earth at this time, and after all that was going on, God mentions, there was this one guy who did walk with me. There was this guy. His name was Enoch. And so I took him, after that. Now, it could be that Enoch just lived to be 365 years old, and then he died physically for whatever reason. Of course, it's perfectly reasonable. We don't have to necessarily assume that God took him in any special, profound, unique way, especially because we don't have anything recorded here that says exactly how God took him. But now the impression that's kind of given here, if I turn back to Hebrews chapter 11, the impression that's kind of given here is that God did this because Enoch pleased him. The impression is somewhat there. Beginning again in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 5. It says, by faith Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death, and was not found because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony that he pleased God. And if I pause there for just a minute, you could say that because Enoch pleased God, God decided to take him early. All right? Well, now this could be a big deal, especially if you would like to be taken early. All right? Just in case you would like divine intervention for God to just come and get you out of here. And you may not feel like that right now, but later there may be an occasion, or you might have a memory of some circumstance in your life where you thought, this would be a good time, right? This would be a good time to just go ahead and be done, and for God to just come and get me. All right? And so people might be thinking, on occasion, they might be thinking, if I just pleased God enough, then he would be so merciful, especially in the midst of all the tribulations and the suffering and the loss, and I have bills that are due. May he come before I'm evicted. People do think that way, and they may be thinking, well, if I can just find a way to please God enough, maybe he'll come and get me, and then I don't have to go through all the suffering that's forthcoming, or that's going to be coming soon. All right, and so then what are you going to do? All right, how are you going to please God? What is that going to look like? What is going to be the criteria? What is it going to be? All right, where's the list, the description of all the things that you need to do or believe or think or whatever? What is it that needs to happen in your life? What is it that you must accomplish or do so that you will be able to please God? All right? I mean, that's a serious matter. All right? It's a serious matter in this respect, especially if you want him to do something miraculous in your life. All right? Now, the first thing I'd like to pause and speak about is the issue that God can be pleased or he can be displeased. This is a characteristic of God. God is a God of feelings. He has emotions. There are things that he likes. There are things that he does not like. This represents the idea and the reality that he is a person. All right, a person is a person who has feelings, who can be pleased, who can be displeased, who has emotional capacity, who has the capacity to have deep, serious, real emotions. And in this way, we can be pleasing to him or we can be displeasing to him. Now, a big concern that a lot of theologues have is that they are quite concerned that this can give you a tremendous amount of power over God. You know, you might think on occasion, well, you know, I think this is a good day to displease God. You know, I don't like how this day is going or how this day started out, and I just want somebody to be miserable with me. And God is a really easy target, you know, because he's everywhere. And so I'm going to decide that I'm going to ruin his day also. And so I'm going to engage in some terrible evil of some kind. I'm going to find some evil, some sin. And I'm going to do that just so I can displease God and ruin his day. And then we can have some fellowship with each other because we're two fellows in the same ship, very unhappy. All right? There are people who think in these terms, right? I understand that it's unlikely anybody watching this would think in those terms, but I'm using that example in order to exaggerate the point that a person may believe that they have a tremendous amount of power over God, right? But I don't see it that way. I really don't. I personally believe that if God wants to remove himself from the influence of someone else in his capacity, he can do so. And so on that basis, it's not really our responsibility. It's not really our fault per se, but it's something that he has put himself in the path of, and he has subjected himself to, with the expectation that on occasion there will be something that will be pleasing to him, and that this is a reasonable choice. While there may be most of life, there may be a tremendous amount of circumstances, most behavior that people have may be quite displeasing to him. If he can at least get a little, some things that are pleasing to him, then of course it could be well worth it, right? It's a way to look at that. But we have a God who does decide to be a participant in our lives just as we decide to be a participant in his life. And I don't want to take the position, I don't want to present the idea that somehow we are responsible for him being pleased or displeased. I don't believe that we are responsible, or that really is to be our objective. How do we please God? How do we make sure that he is not displeased with us? All right. I know there are a lot of people who are very much consumed with these thoughts, but I do believe that God is responsible for his own feelings, for what pleases him, for what displeases him, that's his world, that's his space, those are his emotions. So also when we relate with one another, we cannot take the position that we are responsible for someone else's feelings. I mean, let me give you an example. If you and I were closer to one another than what we have right now, right? And you decided that I am going to be responsible for your feelings, that's going to be my responsibility. You decided that how you feel, whether you are pleased or displeased, is all going to be on me. All right? Now, can you imagine the kind of pressure I'd have to live under if that was the case? I mean, I have to be careful about everything I say, everything I do, even the look on my face, because at some point, quite likely, I'm going to displease you. And you are going to you're definitely going to inform me that I fail to fulfill my obligation to make sure that your emotions are well satisfied. All right? Now, I have a lot to do in life. I do. I have a lot of responsibilities, and I take care of those things very well. But there's just not a lot of my life left available to have that kind of relationship with someone, to add that to my list of I am now going to be fully responsible for how you feel. And when I fail, well, now there's all kinds of other things I've got to add to what I need to do in order to fix this problem. In addition to that, I mean, there is just going to be no end to this, and that's going to be quite a burden. Do you really want someone to be in your life in that way? All right, now listen, I think it's a good thing for people to please one another, and I don't think it's a good thing for people to displease one another. I don't want to take away from those good things, all right? I don't want to take away from that. But I'm saying this in the sense of responsibility and partially as well to eliminate the idea of control, to eliminate that and to say, look, you cannot have the kind of power that you think you have or that you're worried about having or that somebody else would like you to have. If that kind of power exists, the solution is simple. Eventually, someone will exit that relationship. And it's probably going to be the person who is suffering the most, okay? That's the person who's just going to exit the relationship. Now, when you look at the idea of pleasing God, going back to that I initiated just a few minutes ago, what's going to be the list? What will be the criteria? Like I said, everybody's got a set of emotions. Everybody's got a set of feelings. There are things that please them. There are things that displease them. But that list is not always the same. It's just not always the same. There may be some similarities between some people's lists, but in general, that's part of what defines the individualistic nature of different people. So if this is the case, then whatever list you have with God, it's not necessarily going to be the same list you're going to have with others. But even if there is, then what is this list going to be? Whatever it is, there's only one thing that can be concluded with this list, and that is that you either do it or you don't. So we don't have to define the criteria. We just need to state that if criteria exists, well, then you're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. And this establishes the relationship based of repentance and obedience. This establishes the relationship of the law, that if you do, then you get these results and God is pleased with you. Why? Because of what you did or because of what you didn't do. And that was the testimony of Cain and Abel. So do you skip the testimony of Cain and Abel and just one verse later, 2 verses later, now you're going to use the testimony of Enoch to say the exact opposite? And in some cases, people do this. That's why I have to spend so much time on this, because this is a way that some people will teach about these passages or preach on these passages, is that they'll say one thing and then they say something completely different, the exact opposite in many cases. And this is one of those examples. Are you going to please God because of what you do and don't do, or not? What is going to be the criteria? With Abel, it was simple. He was pleasing to God because he did not assert himself and the relationship between him and God based on what he did. So also, with Enoch, there is no indication here that Enoch really did anything except walk with God. Really, that's all we've got. And so whatever the list was that somebody came up with or somebody thought of or may have existed, whatever this list may have been, this criteria may have been, what we know is that he walked with God. And that was all. So what does it mean to walk with God? Well, we don't have enough information to be able to clearly define what that is because we don't have the list, right? So I can only tell you what I think. Right? And that's the only thing that I can share about, my own personal testimony. I'm going to make this the question for you guys to consider asking amongst each other. What does it mean to walk with God? All right, what does that mean? And what does that mean to you? And how would you define that? How would you represent that? All right, I think it's a reasonable question, and I think that there can be different testimonies concerning this. I'm just speaking of what mine is. Don't try to just duplicate mine. You may very well have your own concerning how you would describe or how you would express this. To me, the idea of walking with God really is as simple as just simply living my life with an acknowledgement of His presence. Living my life with an acknowledgement of His presence. That I'm going to walk in this life. I'm going to do things. You know, this morning before I started speaking here live like this, there were a lot of things that I did. I was walking through my day, walking in my life, and my God was with me through all of those things. And I'm going to be done here pretty soon, and when I'm done, I'm going to continue walking. I'm going to keep going. I got the rest of the day. I got a new day tomorrow, and I'm going to do these things and live my life with an acknowledgement of the presence of my God, who He is, what He's given. And on occasion, I may ask Him a question. I may inform Him of something. Those are relational qualities, relational experiences that to me are ways of defining and understanding a little bit about what it means to walk with God. And this, I believe, is pleasing to Him, to live our lives with an acknowledgement that He is. For those in your life, right? For those who are close to you, wouldn't you like to know that those who are in your life are living their lives with an acknowledgement and an understanding that you exist? All right? That you exist, that you are a part of their lives. And that maybe on occasion here or there, they may ask you a question or inform you of something or invite you to be a participant in something that they are doing. Or maybe they can be a participant in something that you are doing. That's walking together, walking with one another, living our lives together in a relational experience, in a relationship. And that can be pleasing to you, and that can be pleasing to them, just as it is pleasing to God, and it is pleasing to us. I find it very pleasing to know that God is a part of my life. That just as I can bear witness and testimony of Him, so also He can bear witness and testimony of me, just like He did with Abel. All right, so going back to verse 6, Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. But without faith, it is impossible to please Him, for he who comes to God must believe that He is. All right? You must believe that He is. Now, with each other, it's fairly easy to believe that we are, that we exist. With God, it can be a little bit of a challenge for some folks, but He likes that. He enjoys that. He appreciates that. That is something that is meaningful to Him, that we believe Him when we consider the volume of the evidence that is available that can show us that He exists. And when we respond to that and acknowledge the reality of Him, He does find that pleasing. Continuing into verse 6, for he who comes to God must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. All right, diligently seeking Him. And that is an active thing, right? For us to seek our God. This is an important thing for us to do. Now, do we have a claim on Him? Can we say, now God, I sought after you, and so you owe me? Of course not. We know that, right? We know that we cannot just establish some debt with God and saying, there were lots of people who did not seek after you, who did not pursue you to know you or anything. Lots of people, and I did. So you owe me. We're not going to relate to Him in that way. Or if we try, it's very unlikely that He's going to respond in a positive way. Okay? But there is a representation of active participation. In what ways can we seek after God? That's a good question as well, right? In what ways can we seek after God? Just walking in our daily lives with an acknowledgement of him is a way of seeking your God. It is. It is a way of seeking him. And the individual lives that we have, they all have what seems like an unlimited set of opportunities for us to seek him and to know him. So we can seek him in the sense of just simply acknowledging his presence. We have the scriptures available to us today in abundance, which is the testimony of all the things that he's done. Well, not all, but many of the things that he's done and things that he has said. Those are ways that we can seek him. And through exploring those things that have already happened, we may be able to ask him about what happened. What was he thinking? What was he doing? What did he see? How did he feel? And he may respond. Those are ways of seeking after our God. There are rewards for seeking after God, but what are these rewards, right? I mean, what are the rewards that you would like to have? How would you like God to reward you for seeking after him? Now, that's a loaded question, isn't it? Because there are more than enough people who will give you the list of how they would like God to reward them, right? They will say, I need a delivery. I need, FedEx or UPS. I need Amazon, right? Somebody needs to make a delivery. And here's my list of all the things that I would like delivered. That's a common way that people will think of the idea of a reward. Because of your relationship with your God, you're going to get some stuff, okay? You're going to get some stuff. And if you don't get the stuff you expect, you're going to be asking, where's the stuff, right? I've heard people use that phrase. Where's the stuff? Okay? And that's just not the way life is, all right? I understand that sometimes life can look like that. But folks, God is not a God who just delivers stuff. He might, he does, by all means, and I'm not going to suggest that he won't. But my point is that more people than not are interested in what God is going to deliver. Can I have one of his cows, right? How about that? I just want one of his cows. Even right now, I could. Well, I don't think I could use a whole cow. I don't think I have enough freezer space for that. But half a cow would be good. I could use half a cow right now. I mean, I can understand and I can appreciate that. But I don't have an expectation that because I seek after God, he owes me half a cow. A quarter of a cow would be fine as well, right? But he owes me a quarter or a half. That's not a healthy relationship, right? That just isn't. That because of what I do, this is what I get in return, because this person owes me that or whatever. There's no future in having a relationship with somebody of that nature. But when people relate to their God in that way, sometimes something may happen. Most of the time it won't. What do you do with that? It's an opportunity for a discussion, right? But he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. What is the reward? What is the reward? Is it really going to be stuff? Is it going to be one of his cows or a quarter or a half? What's it going to be? If not here on earth, maybe you'd like to feel a little bit more holy and say, well, I'll wait until heaven. I'll take my rewards in heaven. So as long as he rewards me in heaven and gives me something special there, that's gonna be okay. That will work. I sought after him, and I didn't get anything while I was physically alive. But after I died, then I got everything was compensated. When people take that kind of a position, it's very easy to have the posture with God that, God, I sought after you, and I want you to know I'm coming. I am coming. I will be there soon. And when I arrive, that is when you had better deliver. That is when especially because you haven't delivered yet. You need you need to make up for all this stuff. What does that sound like? That sounds to me like the idea of going to heaven is more like a debt collection experience. That's what it is. That you're going to go and collect on all the debts that God owes you. And there are people who think in these terms, all right? They just are. That they kind of believe that the idea of rewards in heaven is a debt collection experience. Okay? Now listen, I do believe that there will be rewards. We know that there will be. It's all over the scriptures, right? In fact, for Living God Ministries, I produced a set of programs, Rewards in Heaven. All right? I had a lot to say about that. Go and listen to those if you haven't heard them already. I also included a few programs on eternal punishment along with those too. But you know, people are thinking in these terms that is what it means to be rewarded, and they're not thinking about what the real reward is. Okay, when you seek after God, if you're going to seek after Him, if you want to be pleasing to Him, and you want Him to be pleased with you, right? And you want there to be a healthy quality relationship between you and God. Are you seeking after Him? Are you expressing faith towards Him? Are you walking with an acknowledgement of His presence in your life as you live your daily life? Are you walking with God? Is all of this being done so that you can get some reward from God that is defined in those kinds of terms? No. If you seek after God, you don't seek after Him so that you can take His stuff. All right? That's not good. I understand that there is an abundance of people in the world around us who seek relationships with other people just so they can take their stuff. I understand that. I know that. I've experienced that. All right? I know all about that. That's why people have relationships with other people. They hear about them, or they see them, or they meet them, and they size them up. You know, and they do an accounting, you know, what's this person's net worth, that kind of stuff. And then they decide, you know, if they want to engage in a relationship with this person. Why? Because their intent is to take their stuff, right? That's their reward. Their reward for pleasing this person, for being in a relationship with them, for seeking after them. It's so that they can get their stuff. And that's how they relate to God, in the same way. All right, people relate to God in the same way that they seek after Him because of the rewards, the blessings, the stuff, you know, whatever they're trying to get out of Him, instead of realizing something that is so simple. All right, if you seek after God, and you want to seek after God, and you want to be pleasing to God, right? If you want to seek Him, then the objective should be to find Him. Now, I know that was pretty deep, so let me say it again. Okay? If you're going to seek after God, then do so with the intent of finding Him. All right, pause just for a second, let that sink in, right? That's the idea. That's the reason. That's the purpose. That's the objective. If you're going to believe that there is a God, if you're going to have faith and trust in Him, if you're going to walk with Him, if you're going to seek Him, the idea is that you'll find Him. In other words, it's not about the rewards. It's not about the blessings. It's not about the stuff. It's about Him. Do you want this person to be in your life or not? Or do you just want their stuff? Do you want the person? Do you want this person to be with you? Do you want to be with them? So if you're going to seek after Him with the intent of finding Him. And the more you seek Him, the more you are wanting to know Him. That this is good, all right? This is good. To know Him. And you know, He is such an incredible and extraordinary person that there is just so much to know. You know, there's so much to know about him and so much to enjoy about him that it'll never end. And this is a good thing. You know, there will always be something new. So he is a rewarder for those who seek him because they will find him. If you will seek after him, you will find him. Therefore, what is the reward? God is the reward. He is the reward. And be thankful that you have him as the reward. So again, in verse 5 and 6, by faith Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death, and was not found because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony that he pleased God. Why? Because he walked with him. God likes that. He likes it when people walk with him. Don't you like it when people walk with you? You know, when I go for a walk and I don't have anybody walk with me, I don't like that. I don't find that pleasing. I mean, it's pleasing, okay, you know, enough that I'll keep doing it. But still, you know what I mean? But without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. And how will you be rewarded? By finding him. And then the two of you can walk together. And that is pleasing to each other. All right? Now, I don't remember what the question was that I brought up because I did not write one down. Right here, I didn't write one down. But I did ask a question earlier, and I can't recall what that was. I will have to review this again. There were two questions that I asked that you guys can work with in your small groups, and I didn't remember either one of them. So there you go. You know, I'll review these as well and write it down for when I reproduce this in a month or two, maybe 3 months. I'll reproduce this and come up with something as kind of like a final cut. That's what I'm doing with these live presentations, and then I upload them to the other channel. So the channel you're watching right now is Aaron Budjen Live, and then there's the other channel which is just Aaron Budjen, and that's where I'm uploading the final versions of these messages that I intend to have posted for Bible studies and for future use. These live programs they really need to be deleted at some point. And just no longer, you know, and just kind of expire. So that's the model that I'm working off of. Thank you for taking the time to be with me here this morning, and I'll be back next week to talk about Noah. We got a lot that we can say about Noah, and then we have Abraham, and these are the different ways that they were able to testify of God and be a testimony of Him. All right? Thank you. Let's pray. Dear God, thank you so much for this time that we got to spend together to review what happened between you and Enoch. And Lord, I do pray that we will keep our attention focused properly on the idea of seeking you in the sense that the objective is to find you and to know you and to walk with you. And I thank you for this in Jesus' name. Amen.